The second video in this video series covers two of the tools that we have created for assessing student performance during the reading room experience portion of the clerkship. The two forms listed here, the direct observation and feedback form and the reading room evaluation form, are intended to provide students with a fairly detailed understanding of their performance for the purposes of identifying areas of particular strength and weakness, but also to document their performance for this experiential portion of their clerkship. I imagine there are many different possible ways to provide students with feedback, and I encourage you to work with the one that you feel would work best, in addition to helping students by completing these two forms for them. For the remainder of the video, I will discuss these forms in more detail. The direct observation and feedback form is intended to provide students with formative feedback. That is to say, it would allow you to give them timely feedback that they can use to improve their skills during the course of this rotation, or potentially during that reading room session. The tool that we have designed for this purpose is shown here. Students will fill in the first two lines of the form indicating their name and the radiology room they rotated to that day. I'd like you to show them a case with fairly standard findings of commonly encountered diseases and observe the student as they name the imaging study, evaluate the images, identify key findings, present a differential diagnosis, and offer the most likely diagnosis given the available data. And we understand that students may not be able to successfully perform all of these tasks. Your job is not necessarily to bring them up to speed such that they can perform these tasks, but to evaluate whether or not these tasks are specifically performed as they interpret patient images. I've provided a space to record the accession number of the study that is shown to the student. This would appear to assume that the case must exist in our PACS system somewhere, and if it does, clearly you would record the accession number of that case in the space provided. You are, however, also invited to use cases from anywhere, from old computer files, from other teaching files, old lectures, or from the internet. If the case was not in our PACS system, feel free to record the diagnosis and the imaging modality in the radiology accession number line. After identifying the medical student's level of training, you will then, based on the student's performance, document the presence or absence of the following criteria: appropriate description of the type of imaging examination, demonstration of a systematic checklist for image evaluation, description of pertinent findings, presentation of an appropriate differential diagnosis based on the imaging findings, and arrival at the appropriate or correct diagnosis. These are intended to be yes/no answers, and this form is intended to be something that is completed fairly quickly. Remember to sign, date, and print your name at the bottom of the page, and then this form is returned to the students. Students are asked to review the form, and then at the end of their rotation, submit the form to Carrie Poole or myself. Students are required to submit only one of these forms for their entire 2-week clerkship, though they may opt to have more than one of these forms completed. We are, however, asking that they not exceed one form per reading room day. It should also be noted that this form will not be used in calculating the student's final grade. It is intended only to provide them with feedback in order to improve their image assessment skills. The next form is the reading room evaluation form, which is intended to provide a summative evaluation of the student's reading room performance for each of their reading room sessions. The student will have either a resident, a fellow, or a faculty member complete one of these evaluation forms for each reading room session. The form will be completed and submitted by the evaluator directly to Carrie Poole or me by the end of that week. It's important to note that this form will be used in order to calculate the student's grade, and it will exist as a documentation to support the ultimate grade that they are given at the end of the rotation. As a result of this, it is critical that these forms are submitted as soon as possible, again, at the end of that week. Moving down to the scoring portion of the form, you'll notice that each criteria is scored on a 1 to 5 scale, and this is a 1 to 5 scale for which 1 is good, 1 is outstanding, and 5 is bad or unacceptable in this case. A good way to guide your scoring of students is to consider a medical student who is of average capabilities and average performance. This entirely average student performance would warrant a 3 score on this evaluation form. Scores of 1 are reserved for the select few that are truly outstanding in a particular category, and a score of 5 are reserved for those with an unacceptably substandard performance. The last thing I'll do is run through these criteria and explain them in more detail. First, the inquisitiveness and overall engagement criteria is intended to evaluate the student's level of investment in their rotation, the amount of responsibility that they take for their assigned tasks, and their overall level of inquisitiveness. Our expectation is that all students will be attentive and engaged in reading room conversations. A score of outstanding is reserved for the student that goes above and beyond in terms of resourcefulness, as well as a student that demonstrates the ability to augment workflow within the reading room. An unacceptable performance would be a student that is completely disengaged from the activities within the reading room, shows active disinterest or preoccupation with other activities that are not related to reading room matters. The ability to generate a differential diagnosis, overall knowledge base, and professionalism can also be scored, keeping the average medical student in mind at a score of a 3. An outstanding score in each of these categories would be a score, or rather functioning at the level of one of our junior residents. Lastly, integration and application of imaging concepts describes how well students retain concepts that they have learned during that reading room session and how well they apply those concepts to new cases. Clearly, in this instance, a student that is completely disengaged or preoccupied with some other activity will probably not do particularly well in the integration and applications stage. Similarly, a student that is engaged and attentive is more likely to be able to absorb and then subsequently apply imaging concepts learned during the reading room session. So there is some inherent redundancy in this grading scheme, but my goal is to reward students that are engaged, that are knowledgeable, who participate, who are actively involved, and who add value to our reading room services. That concludes this second video. If you have further questions about the process, about the overall structure of the new rotation, or about these evaluation tools, feel free to contact me by email. And as always, I'm eager to hear any suggestions, comments, or areas of improvement that you have for the system.